the greatest explorer you've never heard of. He commanded the largest fleet in human history. 700 ships, 30,000 men, voyages halfway around the world. This Muslim admiral sailed 60 years before Columbus, with ships 7 times larger. So why did China try so desperately to erase him? The answer reveals one of history's most tragic what-ifs, and a warning about what happens when politics defeats progress. It begins with a boy named Zheng He, born in 1371 in Yunnan, China. His family was Muslim, descendants of a Persian governor. He grew up hearing stories of lands beyond, of holy cities in the desert, of oceans that stretched forever. His father had made the pilgrimage. He was 10 years old when his world ended. In 1381, Ming Dynasty armies invaded Yunnan to crush the last remnants of Mongol resistance. His father was killed in the fighting. The boy was taken from everything he knew. What followed would shape him in ways no one could imagine. He was brought into the imperial court, thrust into a life he never chose. A world of strict rules and duty. A child facing unimaginable upheaval. Yet something within him refused to collapse. Zheng He refused to break. He was assigned to serve Prince Zhu Di, a son of the Ming Emperor. Somehow, despite everything, the young eunuch impressed his master. He was intelligent, capable, loyal, and he possessed a physical presence impossible to ignore. Historical records describe him as extraordinarily tall, perhaps 7 feet. When Zhu Di launched a rebellion against his nephew, Zheng He fought alongside him, not as a servant, as a soldier. When Zhu Di emerged victorious, claiming the throne as the Yongle Emperor, he rewarded his loyal eunuch with a new name, Zheng He. The castrated slave boy had become one of the most powerful men in China. But the emperor had bigger plans. China was rich and powerful, yet the world didn't know it. Yongle wanted to project Chinese power across the known world. He wanted every king and sultan from Japan to Africa to understand. He needed a fleet, and he needed someone to command it who had proven his loyalty beyond any doubt. Someone with no family ties, no political ambitions, someone completely dependent on imperial favor. A eunuch. In 1403, Zheng He was given resources that defy comprehension. The Longjiang shipyards near Nanjing became the largest industrial operation in the medieval world. Thousands of workers labored around the clock, felling forests, forging iron, weaving sails, constructing vessels on a scale never attempted before. The treasure ships that emerged were floating palaces. Historical records describe the largest as measuring 440 feet long and 180 feet wide. 9 masts, over 1,000 sailors each. If these dimensions are accurate, these ships were roughly 7 times the length of Columbus's Santa Maria, built nearly a century later. Let that sink in. 7 times larger, 60 years earlier. 317 ships, nearly 28,000 men. The largest naval expedition in human history. Columbus would reach America with 3 ships and 90 men. Where did Zheng He go? Everywhere. Vietnam, Java, Sumatra, Sri Lanka, India, Persia, Arabia, the east coast of Africa. Over 7 voyages spanning 28 years, the treasure fleet visited more than 30 countries. They didn't conquer, they impressed. They traded, they collected tribute. They demonstrated that China possessed capabilities beyond anything else on Earth. The psychological impact was immense. Imagine standing on a beach in East Africa. a fisherman who had never seen a ship larger than a local dhow. Then, shapes emerged from the horizon. Red-hulled giants with masts like forests. Some witnesses thought it was the end of the world. But here's what makes Zheng He extraordinary. He wasn't just a commander, he was a diplomat. A Muslim leading a Chinese fleet, he could speak with Arab merchants and African sultans in ways no Han Chinese could. His faith opened doors. His background as an outsider made him the perfect insider. In Sri Lanka, when a local king attacked the fleet, Zheng He captured him and brought him back to China. But instead of execution, the emperor released him and restored his throne. A demonstration of power and mercy that echoed across Asia. In Southeast Asia, Zheng He intervened in local politics, supporting legitimate rulers against usurpers. And everywhere he went, Zheng He left something behind. Chinese communities that still exist today. Temples in Indonesia and Malaysia that honor him as a god. Trade relationships that shaped Asian commerce for centuries. This was China's moment. The world's dominant civilization, projecting power across half the globe with technology no one could match. If this had continued, history would have been written in Chinese. It didn't continue. Why would a nation erase its greatest hero? The Yongle Emperor died in 1424. His successors had different priorities. The treasure voyages were expensive. Confucian scholars who dominated the bureaucracy had always hated them. They hated the expense. They hated the eunuchs who ran them. They hated the foreign influences that came with trade. Zheng He made one final voyage in 1431. He died during the return journey in 1433, probably in India. He was 62 years old. He had spent 30 years sailing the world's oceans. What happened next should make you angry. The new emperor ordered the treasure fleet dismantled. Ocean voyages were banned. The records of Zheng He's expeditions were deliberately destroyed. Ship blueprints were burned. Sailors were forbidden from sharing their knowledge. It became illegal to build ships with more than 2 masts. The greatest naval power the world had ever seen deliberately crippled itself. Why? The reasons are complicated. Cost was real. Each voyage consumed enormous resources. The Confucian ideology that dominated the court valued agriculture over commerce. Foreign trade brought foreign ideas. Better to turn inward, to focus on the eternal truths of Chinese civilization. But there was something else. Politics. Zheng He was a eunuch. Eunuchs and Confucian scholars were locked in eternal power struggle. And Zheng He himself? Too connected to eunuch power. The scholars who wrote history simply wrote him out. The timing could not have been worse. In 1492, less than 60 years after Zheng He's final voyage, Christopher Columbus reached the Americas in ships that would have been laughably primitive by Chinese standards. In 1498, Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and reached India, opening a sea route that would eventually allow Europeans to dominate Asian trade. Europeans arrived in Asian waters and found no treasure fleet waiting to oppose them. The technological edge had been abandoned. Imagine if Zheng He's successors had continued his work. Imagine Chinese fleets encountering Vasco da Gama's ships. The age of European exploration would never have happened. The colonial empires that shaped the modern world would never have existed. Instead, China turned inward, and the world turned without them. For 500 years, Zheng He was largely forgotten. His story survived in fragments, in Southeast Asian temples, in local legends. in a few documents that escaped destruction.
This report is filled with
Then,
lies.
in the 20th
The
century,
voyages must
scholars
stop.
began piecing
Agreed.
the story back together,
Convince the Emperor
and China
immediately.
began to remember. Today, Zheng He is everywhere in China. His face appears on stamps and currency. Museums celebrate his voyages. The government promotes his story as evidence of China's peaceful rise. See, they say, we explored the world before Europe, but we didn't colonize, we didn't conquer, we came in peace. There's truth in this. Zheng He's voyages were remarkably non-violent compared to European exploration. But there's also propaganda. The irony is bitter. The same government that erased Zheng He now celebrates him. What remains of the man himself? No one knows where. The greatest admiral in Chinese history has no grave. But his legacy floats in every ship that uses watertight compartments. Every vessel steered by a stern-post rudder. Technologies that Chinese engineers perfected, that Zheng He's ships carried across the world. Sanbao Gong, the three-jeweled eunuch, a protector of sailors, a symbol of the impossible, a slave boy who became an admiral, a forgotten hero finally remembered. Zheng He's story asks uncomfortable questions. When ideology trumps achievement, when a nation chooses fear over exploration. Now China remembers, but the question remains, what else have we forgotten? What other heroes lie buried in silence? What other futures were destroyed by the small men who feared them? Zheng He sailed the world with 700 ships. He died forgotten, buried in an ocean that doesn't remember. But his story survived, carried in temples and legends and fragments of burned documents, waiting 5 centuries to be told again. The Muslim admiral China tried to forget. They failed. Subscribe if you want more forgotten history. Check out my video on the Chinese junk to understand the ships that made this possible. Comment below, did you know about Zheng He? What surprised you most? See you in the next chapter.